in 2015, I got to go into like an A9 level war room where we were aggregating information about a network of counterfeiters, but truly double agents, we called it black hat tactics, bad agents, if you will. But we're talking on a level that, was truly global terrorism. But the thing is, it's a network, and they were rotating their names. And I was the one that caught it, that they were basically almost set up systematically. Like, I showed them, like, it's on a schedule. Like, I was the one that was basically, connecting the name shifts in this area with this area with this area and connecting it all together. But it was under a network called ENG. And they thought it was China. And I was like, no, I think it's English. I think it's Britain. In fact, I bet it's Britain with an O. I don't know how I knew that. But I only today, I only went back to the 60s and really had been focusing on the 60s, going through a detective's files relating to the Ohio Farm Bureau mill fraud and Landmark Inc., like open-ended loans. Like, there was a network of this relaunching in the 90s, and his case really brings it back to Harding. And I get why, because Harding and this whole thing was set up out of Ohio. It really kind of goes hand in hand with the birth of Sohio, that Harding, this obscure guy from Ohio, gets into office and brings this network of men, one of them with the last name Hughes. I mean, it is verbatim, the exact plot. And to see he has one child and her name is Elizabeth Britton. And Layman is in here. So knowing that the plot in the 20s was a cast of characters, they even call it the Ohio Gang, right? Knowing this, seeing these names come back had to have gotten people so excited. Our trust attorney, her estate is liquidated through the Layman Law Office. Nan L. Britton, if you look her up, she's connected to the Beams. So for anyone who's not aware of the plot, because most Americans aren't, in the 20s, the plot was to create entities that took over the Ohio Farm Bureau and assumed their identity, as well as the Texas Company and Gulf Oil, aka a gentleman named Harry Wilton, aka Wilton, aka Winston, is the way they actually have it set up to kind of like waterfall as far as aliases. He took his patents and then with other gentlemen enhanced those patents, and those gentlemen were granted permits and leases to safely explore drilling in the Gulf. Oh, who granted it? It was basically the federal government. But it was through the Farm Bureau that they had their trusts titled, their ranches. They had everything backed by the Farm Bureau. Why wouldn't they? The Farm Bureau created our nation's first insurance company. Wouldn't you believe it? Yeah, Farmers Insurance. It then became nationwide. And during that time, there was an investigation into securities being missing. It's funny how, the past almost recreates itself. Literally. So, in 1998, there is hardcore manipulation of not only the Farm Bureau trademarks, right, but nationwide trademarks. They changed the tagline to "The man from Nationwide is on your side." If you look into that, it was last changed, or a fake one kind of emerged in the 60s. But they also bring back cash bribe oldie. And look at the Nationwide logo on the back end. Nobody? I mean, ahead of 9/11, nobody thought that's a little odd. What? They also changed this other logo. But anyways, I am familiar with the plot somewhat because in the basement of our home, my grandparents' home, it was a treasure trove. It was a treasure trove. And I spent a lot more time as a child there than my brother and sister. But when my grandpa let me pick out books, sometimes I would just go in the basement and try and drag these big books up. And there was a box with the Mills and the Wells plot kind of in there. There were letters, and essentially one of the biggest targets was William Burton Stoner through Helen Stoner, his daughter, out of Texas, who happened to marry Harry. So this becomes very interconnected. So what connects Texas to Ohio is the Elms, everybody, the Elms. They actually created a company called Elmco. So the Standard Oil entities, they call them the shells. I call them the shells. Well, they call themselves the shells. Are just these fake shells. They're shell corps. They literally, in 1998, that same year, the cash bribe, when you see the timeline, all you have to do is audit the shells that are all managed by CT Corporation Trust, or CSC, which is the international version. All you do is, and Schwartz and Company is one of those entities. There's 7,904 that are reinstated as of 2000. And they all are systematically set up to liquidate securities, property, mineral rights offshore. Okay? And they have continued to do that on a very pre-engineered timeline. Okay? So the liquidation of the Farmers Trust was set up a 25-year. Wait until you see it is set up to transfer these companies on 9/11 of 1996. Yeah, they're all set up to transfer in 5 years. And then the Farmers trademark transfers on 9/12 to Farmers Ethanol, who states its first U.S. milestone as terrorist attack, the United States of America. Now, I happened to get a symbol. I saw a symbol in one of our churches, and it was like I was like, that's not Hebrew. So I actually have been trying to figure out, like, anybody who knows Mandarin, like hardcore Mandarin, to figure out what the symbol means, like, because it's on our church. It was like on one of our big churches. My grandpa told me if I go in St. Paul's and our names are no longer on that church, the plot is in motion. He told me that right before he died. And had I gone in 1981, Charles and Diana had just been there the day he died. The church and at the Elms. Small world, huh? No, Diana was a distant cousin of Sarah Stoner Dunlap. So, grandma, the grandma, Frances. But anyways, the symbol, it's exceeding the UK, catching the USA. And it stems from like the late 1950s, but it's back. It's back. Exceeding the UK, catching the USA. And it's basically China, like laughing on the back end because they're a part of it. But it is truly in 2019 that the mineral rights estate historically titled to the Farmers Trust that had been established in 1867 transfers. It transfers to the Mills and Little Johns. The Little Johns are the Spencers. Search it, Google it. Tim Kerr. If you go over to Otterbein, they switched George H. Dunlap to Timothy Kerr. And he's also on this fake nationwide trust. The Kerrs on the back end of the Little Johns. It's disgusting. So what they did is they basically had Epstein assume the identity of a gentleman named John Dunlap, and he was essentially George Dunlap Jr. on the back end. And they create George as Hugh Dunlap. And this was the plot, dating all the way back to the 60s. And wait until you see Landmark. Basically, they create this co-bank, ABC, which is an offshore bank. That's why none of us at Amazon could figure out, like, who's the bank? And all of a sudden, when I saw Landmark Global connected to this huge network, I was like, it's Farmers. I know it. It's Farmers. They hijacked this, and it was part of 9/11. And that's when we started looking into it, and quite frankly, I became obsessed then. Because when I looked up ENG, when I was involved with the Zimmermans in a case, and I saw that they were incorporated by Sarah Dunlap, I was just like, absolutely, this was the plot. And hey, the fact is that these men behind it go all the way back they signed contracts in 1917 with the king to basically make sure that they did this covertly so that they could truly take over America and liquidate our civil liberties, our securities, our insurance without us knowing. Without us knowing. And they started, the plot got kicked back in motion as of 81 when Big Papi became vice president. It was almost like it was his project. No different than when, Cheney steps in. But the Farmers Trust, yep, I nailed it. That is what was being liquidated. They create fake little banks. And it is a network of banks. Many of them also linked to mills. So in the 1920s, they created fake, many of them like printing mills, like paper mills. They even do cotton mills, This has been a plot that goes all the way back to 1832, where the first records recorded. Truly, that's when the Steiners changed their name to Stoner and migrate to Ohio. But this plot, they basically took notice of how George Washington cut up and, surveyed land. And he was a farmer, by the way, and a mason, a true mason, a knight of the Templar, if you will. And they just said, we're just going to hijack each one of those trusts. And basically, you couldn't really take over the country until you took over that's what this is, right? So this safe goes missing. The Farm Bureau safe went missing, and there's an article I'll show you. It went missing in 1955, and that's exactly when George H.W. actually brought the safe from Caddis. Mr. Slaughter, when I showed him a picture of the safe, he was like, how is that in your house? I was like, is this the safe? He was like, yes, it's been painted, but that's the safe. There were only so many created in 1906, and George brought it to the landmark here, and it went missing, and they found it at this Lafayette landmark, which was a fake one. And what they were doing is trying to get this thing open. It was one of the fireproof safes. What was in there are all the original farm deeds. Well, it goes missing again. So here's some of the just examples of securities that are transferred, and then they are basically set up to bet against the industry. It's like put options. You're betting against there's nothing more profitable than planning a terrorist attack. I'm telling you, when I saw these numbers, I was like, Lehman Brothers is 156 billion overnight. Boom, boom, boom. But it's not just that they pre-planned this. And I had a heart attack. It's 2.9 trillion transfers truly through this network of banks. And on the back end is the bank that had been established for farmers. Way to go. But they take out and they create these energy co-ops. It's essentially a parcel that just separated the energy, the mineral rights from that landmark or the mill. So they're taking over. So they basically authorize the transfer of all mineral rights, and then they just parcel them out. So these are you saw 530 million, many of them. So they start setting this up as of 2000. Everybody's getting paid on some level. They set up these trusts. There's 333. Oh, sweet. But they do this, if you actually go back, it is Big Papi in 77, backdating it to 70, he has to, because the whole plot was shut down in 68, and then it's truly a court case in 69. So he has to go to 70. But George H.W. thinks he's stealing this coal for the family, and Sarah, both of them. No, they actually set this up with Nelson Rockefeller and Gerald Ford, aka Leslie King, to transfer to Elizabeth Ford. And on the back end, it's this Elizabeth Britain, the same exact plot. It's crazy. Then they created this fake Alberta. So that's Albert. They are literally transfer, and of course they bring it back as New Frontier. If it ain't broke, why fix it? New Frontier and Camelot exploration are what Big Papi uses. He's just, But Cheney's hey, why not just bring back the Harding plot? What you come to figure out in just auditing the 7,000, well, it ends up being over 10,000 entities, is that they are systematically brought back to life from both the 20s and the 60s. It's any entity or any trust that had ever been established by the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, anybody. It's crazy. Epstein brings them all back. Any of them that still have assets left to gain. But it is truly 2014 that the heirs, there's a fake court case, and they added George H.W. and this LOUs, fake entities, and they also create fake entities. But it is truly the taking of America and defrauding of America. Regardless if this goes all the way back to 77 when, systematically George H.W. Bush, he signed on in the 60s when Kennedy signed off, and he was never going to let it go. I mean, Prescott dug up Geronimo, for God's sakes. The whole skull and crossbones, George H.W. had the Yale yearbook, and I didn't know why. Well, then I opened it up, and it's the one with Big Papi in there. I think it's 1943. And it's every one of those names. Voorhees, Huntington, Rockefeller, Chase, Morgan. I mean, and even though Cheney didn't go, his grandpa did, and his grandpa was involved in the 20s plot. So to say that these men didn't know, how this pans out, and, to set it up through countrywide, that automatically changes to BAC. BAC is Beneficial Acceptance Corporation. We're going to accept the beneficial interest. So here's one from back in the day. So it was just a cluster, small little clusters that were being sent down by fake attorney offices out of, Ohio, Cleveland. And they're just clusters. So this is 13 entities being changed, on the fly. But, once you actually look into this Wilton Enterprises and Wilton Partners, what they're doing is they're liquidating the Texas company securities and assets through Ohio. See, that's a really smart thing to do because you would never guess to look for them there or, whatever. But what they're doing is Jefferson County, Texas, is they liquidate the Harrison County Farm Bureau into Jefferson Landmark, and then it's Jefferson Landmark, Texas. It's brilliant. Jefferson. Jeffco is what Jeffrey Epstein actually goes by. It's what the alias for the Jefferson County Farm Bureau and Jefferson County Mill and Jefferson County. Got it? So that is essentially you create an alias for the true American Farm Bureau, and then you just transfer it. And then you're liquidating it offshore. Now, when it comes to the Steiner Family Trust and all of the federal land patents that had been titled, Jeffrey, you have to go back and see it's John and Kathy. Kathy with a Y, Kathy M, and John R. But, and Bailey is on there. But anyways, you have to go back. Remember, you have to go back to 2001, and that's when this stuff, but it's backdated to 86 because that's when they killed Shapiro. And that's what Shapiro was up to. I believe that the governor of Pennsylvania's name was also Shapiro. What's super cool is if you click on October 9th, 1963, JFK has this huge, news conference. He announces that there's been some fraud relating to mills and grain. And they have seized all of the surplus of grain. And they are working with Russia to still distribute it. And on that same day, the Kennedy name changes on the fake coal service that had been set up by Joe Kennedy. And it's now Bush. So this is recorded on October 9th, the same day that Kennedy basically lets the world know we're shutting this freaking plot officially down. But we're still going to work with countries, we're not going to take away grain or we're not going to take away AE resources, but we're also not going to let them steal our coal, in the wake of going to war. Are you freaking nuts? What is going on here? It made no sense. He's an American, but not George Papi Bush. George Papi Bush is let's just kill the president. And in less than 1 month they do, or 1 month and a week, okay? In Texas, and George Papi is there. And then when you ask George Papi, hey, where were you on the day? He was like, I don't know. Here's the case in Caddis. And you'll want to note that, Mike DeWine as he is Attorney General. But this is a fake entity. Margaret L. Stoner, if you actually look this up, it's Anna Louise. And Anna Louise is a fake entity. It was Anna Louise Taft back in the 20s. And they changed it to Anna Louise Beetham. But it is truly a fake entity that they use for this Margaret L. Stoner. And it's Anna Louise Margaret at this address. Weird, huh? But they add George H. Dunlap. And if you go to his annex estate in Franklin, it truly is set up like in the 80s, and then they get caught, and then it's 91 again, and then it's erased, and then 94, clearly after his wife and his cousin die again. But it is not until 2015 that they truly annex George H. Dunlap's estate, and they convert 6.9 billion. So they'd already issued the bailout. As far as like, how did this happen? And I found it. There's a $6.7 billion federal bailout issued to Jeffrey Epstein's insurance companies that then are claimed to be going bankrupt. No, that was basically the liquidation of George H. Dunlap's securities offshore. Thanks to, when you see, look at this, Nationwide Financial, this own your share of America. They changed the trademark as of May 1999. And then it's a program originated by the first Chicago trust company, and it's Equiserve. They changed, this stuff on the back end is systematically set up ahead of 9/11 to liquidate securities and land. Yeah, and Jeffrey Epstein's bank, when you look at Southern Trust, it is truly set up in like that bank being set up, and then the date, it's given a year to liquidate. It is truly that date, October 16th of 2008, that the whole bottom, he's issued this trademark October 16th of 2007 to expire in 365 days. That's what you gotta love about the timing of this. And so then, it merges on the back end with this Butler Wick. Oh man. Okay, so Landmark Inc. changes its trademark, backdated to 66, and it's basically like feed for pigs. They are so chunks. So is also a pig, and then chunks is puke, right? So chunks 25. So that was back in the year, that must have been like 1925. Yeah, and then of course it's backdated. And then they changed the trademark here. And then this is basically, they change everything. Landmark becomes like gas focused. But what we don't like, is also manipulating airlines and partitioning ownership of, United Airlines. Whew! American. So there's Lehman Brothers. Like, what? So Lehman Brothers is basically split into three different entities that then roll, blah, blah, blah. And they're liquidating mineral rights. That's what the Brookwood Energy and Properties, like minerals. And then you have Lehman Brothers Holdings, which is offshore. And then you have Lehman Brothers. Like, oh, Lehman Brothers, They were issued, all of these companies are liquidating. This is, so watch. 23. Oh, it's off to the right here. You gotta see it. Oh, where is it? Anyways, the other one is 156 billion is what the holdings take. Yeah. Whoa. So it's actually not that hard. You just basically take out the two legitimate heirs. You add, two fake ones. And on the back end, wouldn't you believe they're set up to be those the Ward, Elizabeth's cousins. So they're liquidating Lenny and Margaret's estates as those crazy cousins in the Ward. And then John Kennedy's trust from the 60s is reinstated and liquidated through Union Bank and Trust. It's 2014, during that case, that the state of Ohio creates the fake entity, John Steiner, to not only approve truly transferring the Washington land patent, the Muskingum watershed land patent, the Ohio River Basin land patent. These are federal land patents, people, to Britain, to Ohio, but they also sign up a memorandum of a farm-out agreement, and then they re-record in 2019 the wills and testament of George H. Dunlap and U. Dunlap to allow for any level of hazardous waste dumping, including biowarfare chemicals. It's in his will, and it's not funny. There you go. The timeline, when then you go to Jeffrey Epstein then arrested, he's arrested in July of 2019. His brother, Mark, trademarks the name Epstein the day he's arrested. It's like the day. And then when you look at like what's under the Epstein trademark, all of these other trademarks roll up into it. So then in George's estate and his will, all his wills and testaments are literally filed May 31st. And then like Epstein's arrested like within 30 days. It's very, it's very, and then October of 2019, it is clear that they are liquidating like George H.W.'s estate as if it's Epstein's. Like, does that make sense? But I can't believe that our freaking country has so many people. And if you look at Mike DeWine's, Epstein basically creates an entity for anybody. So there's Jeffrey Clinton, there's Jeffrey Dunlap, there's Jeffrey DeWine. Mike DeWine is accepting farmland as that case is going on. And he accepts securities. They're called country mark dividends. But he accepts an open-ended loan of like 250. It's disgusting. They are quit claiming. They end all endowments that have been set up by George Dunlap by June. Yeah. So what, little, I guess, oil, gas, and coal, and it wasn't little. I mean, we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. Now it's just trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions offshore. Does that make sense? And poisoning the land. And by the way, as of 2005, Ohio has its own EPA. And as of 2012, right before this case, in 2013, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, fracking companies, including Halliburton, Halliburton and Hess, they no longer have to disclose what chemicals they use. And it is a huge joke when you go out in the field. Like, how is this possible? Oh, Halliburton loophole. Everybody loves saying it. They say it everywhere. But here's this Anna Beetham. It's Anna Louise. It's Anna Nelms because of the 1920s. It's crazy. Truly 2015. Historical trusts. And this is the New Albany Bank, which is right next to the New Albany Company, has these on display. And there's all the Warren Harding ones from the 20s. So these are historical trusts that have never, ever, ever, ever surfaced. All of a sudden, in late 2015, right after that case, truly partitions the Farmers Trust for liquidation. These checks just show up next door to where Epstein's working. Oh my God. Well, if you actually look at the data, because we call it big data, this is the exact timeline of what you could expect for these companies to be set up almost as escrow accounts to liquidate securities. And it's September 5 of 2001 that it should have started to hit the U.S. books. Yep. And then these are all set up to basically then fold under this Ohio casualty and then this Ohio casualty of New Jersey, and it does so out of New Hampshire. And that's interesting because Jeffrey Epstein's social security number on that bank application says 000 in the beginning of it. You can clearly see that. And that's New Hampshire. So his social security number is either an entity that was created in New Hampshire, or it just is the Ohio casualty of New Jersey folding out of New Hampshire. Just wanted to make sure everybody got that. Epstein basically has 2 social security numbers and so many EANs. It's not even funny. But the big thing is Epstein's power of attorney is actually recorded in 99, backdated to 91. The reason it's backdated to 91 is that's the year that George H. Dunlap passes away, but it's also the year that, what's-his-face jumped off the boat. It's when Robert Maxwell was trying to kick this plot back in motion again. So we had Arthur Shapiro, we had to kill him off. So the plot became, we'll just do it through Robert Maxwell. And then he jumps off a boat. So they are liquidating all of this again when Big Papi becomes president, and again, it gets shut down. But thank goodness for, the commitment level of the Bushes. But Pauline Epstein, if you actually click into her, she marries John Rockefeller Jr. She's an entity If you go, I mean, it's bananas, but it's Pauline Epstein and then it's Sarah Epstein as trustee that truly kind of transfers all of this. And it's, see, 2015. They're doing this absolutely illegally and covertly. And that is, oh, and if you click into that address, it's Sally Epstein. So Sarah, AKA Sally. And then Sarah Epstein creates a fake entity named Janet Epstein, and it's Janet Hughes. All you do is open up a historical family tree, and you replace them with entities. Sometimes churches, fake churches. Sometimes you just replace, the endowments that were set up for like Otterbein. You just replace them on the back end with Development Corporation for Israel and then Capital for Israel. So these were actually endowments and bonds, or they were basically endowments for Nationwide Children's. Look who gets them. Are you effing kidding me? No. So it was the Bella Wexner Charitable Foundation that this stuff goes through. And then Nationwide Children's trademark in 2019 transfers to the Abigail Wexner Research Foundation. And what the F? That's why when I found out that the farmers in Indiana, their children were going to this place, and she's like, we're a division of Nationwide Children's. I was like, that's enough. That's all you needed to say. Thank you. I asked, what holding company is this facility working through? And then I'd like to see the bylaws. And it turns out they're a research medical facility, and that's just, it's BS. So you should be disclosing what you're researching. Yeah. If you look up Nationwide Children's, they've had Chinese spies charged 5 times in the last 5 years. It's ridiculous. What the hell are they doing? And they're exporting. He set up a DNA bank tied to this. Hello. But Landmark Inc., it's Jeffrey who becomes the sole power of attorney. All right. And then also Joe, and I found out it's Koch is how you say it. I was watching a documentary. That's the Bush family on the back end. But it's Jeffrey and the Bushes that are taking over Landmark Inc., picking up Big Poppy's plot, and Country Mark Cooperative is a fake entity that they create, and they even create it's a subset of entities, right, that oftentimes have expiration dates that merge, convert, and transfer. And so in the back end, you see Country Mark over here, and then there's Country Mark Weiss Miller LLP. They're separating mineral rights, and they call it diamond access. But there is no joke. When you go into these counties, it is this Joseph Koch, a.k.a. Joseph Kennedy Bush. You get what I'm saying? He is setting up, and this is what impacts that Kennedy slide. If you go to any farmer, this is their land, right? They have no idea that these this loan isn't benefiting the farmer. This is an energy co-op loan. Completely separate than the actual farmers. But if I went to trust me, we've gone over this with the Indiana farmers. $200 million is more than they would ever see from their farm. But the fact is, what they're doing is destroying ever being able to farm again. And they're doing this ahead of 9/11. If you're paying attention to Jeffrey Epstein's offshore network, the very biggest trust is the Flat Creek Inc. And by the way, the Steiner Land Trust, they lived on Stony Creek. I believe that the trust was probably the Stony Creek Steiner Land Trust, but they call it Flat Creek. And that has a date of when it transfers. But then you have the St. George Trust, and it doesn't have a date because it doesn't transfer. He literally just made himself the power of attorney over George's trust, the George H. Dunlap. He rolls it up, and he just transfers the bank. But only with our president. Did you see that? Southern Trust. MB Operating is Mary Brinkman. So Jeffrey Chemical is incorporated by Richard Brinkman, spelled accurately. And then Jeffrey Barr, ever hear the Bars? Bill, William. This is basically a parcel, and it represents the Werner Church Road. Clinton's open-ended loans. Everybody, I mean, why not? 2021, which is, by the way, when the world is like suffering and everybody's dying from COVID, wink, wink. China actually became a 30% interest holder of the landmark America 3, nationwide 1, 2. They became like a 30% interest holder. Because Jeffrey's like, how are we going to speed this up? China's like, I got you. We've been working on it. We got you. Yeah. So all of these entities, so this amount in 2022 transfers through the elms. See the elms? And then it goes through the elms of Texas. So it's just like elms. It's like almost the front end, they call the Leon Black front end office, back end office. It's just kind of like whatever. But wouldn't you believe it's truly as this stuff transfers, that oil production versus imports flip-flops, We're like, oh. And then if you look at prices, I mean, that's what this whole energy task force that George, that was basically to take control of our, I don't know what the hell. I mean, nobody does. They didn't even release any information about it until their second term. This little energy task force. But truly, this does not actually flip-flop. It's just the ownership goes from domestic to international. See? It just doesn't. See how easy that is? You just change the trademark ownership. Well, if we look, it's Burton Ray Dunlap. Holy Moses. Yeah, Summa Healthcare, I didn't realize that it kind of like rolls up. Summa Healthcare is basically Howard Hughes paper mill. It's owned by Standard Oil. It all rolls up, and it kind of is, all the health stuff rolls up under Summa. Okay, so Summa absorbs the Landmark Hotel and Casino. So they've got gambling, they've got steel, and they truly are under Summa. Okay, the American Farm Bureau rolls up underneath Summa Foundation. It's crazy. But if you look at the Social Security numbers affiliated with this Sam Dunlap, he's a fake entity. And this Sam Dunlap is married to Anna Louise. Oh, and when you go here and you find out that the prosecutor, Owen Beetham, is the son of like Thomas Beetham, or grandson, but he's married to Portia Beetham, and she's the coroner, but he's the prosecutor, the judge, and the sole successor to the Beetham Law Office. So it just makes it a little bit more like, I maybe could see how. No, so Jeffrey Epstein and all of these entities that he reinstates include all these funeral homes. And it is clear that they have this entire plot not only set up to defraud farmers, but it's very, very, very sophisticated. Very sophisticated. And a lot of times, thanks to our president, and thanks to this back-end integration, which is my biggest problem with this whole entire plot, we still have this in place, and it's a joke. It's a joke that it still is in place. But they create these fake UCCs to attach all this credit. This truly is set up in Delaware County, Ohio. It's where David Yost was the auditor, and then he becomes the new attorney general. Ugh. I mean, it's just, these people they're not public servants. I mean, honestly, they're not. Mr. Slatter got me a photo, and he didn't know if this was you, Dunlap, or AC. He said they looked very much alike, but he laughed when I showed him that photo that's from 1976, even though he would be passed away. But he wanted to make sure I had it. So this is the real AC Dunlap or U Dunlap, and you won't find photos of them anywhere else. But Elizabeth Ford is a part of this, and this Silva Hostetler is Baker Hostetler, and Silva is a part of the plot. On the back end, Julia Littlejohn is Farmers Ethanol. It's basically there you go, it's the mills and the wells, kicking it back off with a fake parcel. Look at that, the parcel 000, and it's Shell USA on the back end. It's Shell USA. Oh, and there's Seymour Epstein. I mean, but it just as simple as, regardless of all the complexities and all of the technology that has gone into this on the back end, it's as simple as opening up that family tree and seeing who was added, who doesn't belong. And it's John A. Dunlap. If you go and McLennan County, Texas, there's a partnership recorded by John A. Fisher of Kingfisher, this fake law office, but it's the Sparks Dunlap partnership, and they're basically liquidating the coal. But it's in the end, it's James and Margaret Cheney. The plot, it comes back from 1968, and it's just sad. But again, Janice, aka, is related to George Washington. So it's just fun to see like how they're kind of like, figuring this stuff out. And then they re-record, ownership of like preserved, did you see that? The irony? Preserved farmland for sale. So they frack it, they separate it, and then they create it. It's basically called a research farm. Yeah. And then you go back and see all the parcels that are in the sale. And they quit claim, see how they divide them up? And they quit claim the energy. So you'll see that it is truly, despite that this all goes back to 9/11, they were going to pinpoint all of this as really happening between 2014 and 2019. Even though this stuff has been rotating and transferring, it's going to, you have to pace it out. And you have to do it, Corky Steiner. Is that not the funniest? Corky was the... Have a great day.